again to the Minister for Environment, Food and Agriculture. How much has been expended by his department on the protection, conservation and enhancement of the island's historic built environment since October 2016, excluding salaries? How any monies have been expended and what plans his department has to increase this budget? Thank you, Mr. President.
Minister to reply. Mr. Moulton.
Thank you, Mr. President. During this administration, £7,653 have been expended on the protection, conservation and enhancement of historic buildings. That excludes salaries since 2016. Whilst the registered building officer role has been vacant, this revenue-funded external consultancy, this has been revenue-funded to external consultancy to research historic buildings and assessment of building condition and research material. There are no plans to increase the budget at the current time, as a primary resource needed to help protect buildings is staffing, which is why an additional role has been provided in this area, for which we are recruiting in addition to the registration officer.
Supplementary, Mrs. Maska.
Thank you, Minister, for that reply. Would the Minister agree that whilst the post of a registered buildings officer or a conservation officer has been vacant for such a long period of time, it has meant that buildings that are on what is known as the provisional list, that is, buildings that were identified a long time ago, i.e. 1978, and when there were 277 buildings identified, and since that time a considerable number more have been identified. These buildings are basically at risk, and it's not really fair to those who own these buildings who may not be aware that they're on this provisional list, nor to those who might potentially look at purchasing them only to find afterwards that they are on a provisional list. Is this actually the right way of dealing with our historic built environment? Such is the responsibility of his department to do so. Thank you, Mr. President.
Mr. Moulton to reply.
Thank you, Mr. President. Not having a registered building officer or an assistant has been a big hindrance to the department in progressing. Your next question addresses the issue of how many buildings we've looked at, and that I'll answer in a minute. We have, and when I took over the department, I tried to engage with other bodies, particularly M&H, to see whether we could use an external resource to assess and bring forward registrations with recommendations, looking at the situation with regard to the resource we had in department. Unfortunately, that failed to get any traction, and we were left with originally a registered building officer and then not having one, so we've had to use resource within the department. It would be my intention to try and progress the situation more quickly, but the reality is that most of the buildings that were provisionally assessed that are owned and maintained by owners or bodies and are kept in good condition. I think most people, if they own something that is worthy of registration or are aware that it may be worthy of registration, will maintain it with pride. And a number of those buildings are government buildings or institutionalised buildings, such as churches, so that they are, in essence, protected in another way. So, in answer to your question, we could have done better, but we have been hindered by a lack of resource, and there may be another way around this. The Honourable Member chairs a forum that may be interested in cooperating with us to help progress registrations in the future.
Supplementary, Mrs. Maska.
Thank you, Minister. Would the Minister agree that we are at almost a watershed in terms of going forward with major pieces of policy, such as the climate change reform way that we would progress? Now, given that there used to be conservation grants for registered buildings and conservation areas that were removed when the VAT bomb, as I would call it, fell on the Isle of Man. And one of the first things that was withdrawn were these grants. Now, might it be a really important juncture where grants could be looked at again, but combined with the approach to maintaining and looking after our traditional buildings, upskilling our building environment and working together to look at how we might assist owners. I would also ask, is the Minister aware that in the early 2000s there were a number of external specialists that were commissioned to do reports? Over 100 reports were done at that time and are probably sitting within his department and need assessing as to where they sit now. That research is actually ready to go, and would it not be a good idea that that was picked up, especially if we're looking at appointing new officers? With regard to the Building Conservation Forum that the Minister has referred to, I do chair that forum. This is where some of my questions have come from today, because there is a concern that our built heritage is not being protected and looked after.
Yeah.
We are happy to work.
Honourable Member, you're in danger of
Sliding. Sorry,
speech. Please ask the question.
Yeah. Will the Minister confirm that when he has the necessary resources, what kind of timescale he might put in place to properly engage with those specialist groups that might be able to join forces and look at supporting our built environment in a proper manner? Thank you.
Minister.
Thank you, Mr. President. I am aware that the honourable member predates me with her involvement in conservation, and was indeed a conservation officer for some time, as I understand it. In an ideal world, we would have grants available for helping owners maintain registered buildings or buildings that are going to be registered. We had the budget yesterday, we have budgetary restraints, and those restraints are outside of my department's remit. Yes, I would like to see grants introduced, and I would like those to be pointed at this sort of area, but there is not much opportunity to do that at the moment. However, looking at the broader picture, is there any evidence of, there is some evidence that buildings do fall into disrepair, and sometimes there are rationales behind that. But in general terms, the buildings around the Isle of Man are in good repair and maintained by responsible owners. Where there are buildings that aren't being maintained, or we feel that are endangered or likely to be demolished, for instance, then we do have process available to us to stop that happening in the short term, to make assessments, as I said earlier. In terms of the workforce, I think reintroducing grants would be useful, because we have local craftsmen that do have skills which could be used, which are underused at the moment. But also going forward, you will be aware that we have recently revisited and upgraded our building regulations, and there are some exemptions for historic buildings which can't meet those standards, but we are upskilling our labour force generally, but that's not necessarily the craftsmen you're talking about in terms of registered buildings.
Supplementary question, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Could the Minister confirm that in his answer he mentioned a figure of £7,000 that's been spent on this area? Was that per year, or was that in total over the last 3 years? He's also mentioned that he has for most of that period, no dedicated staff on this issue. How then can the Minister satisfy this court that he is actually fulfilling his statutory duty under the Town and Country Planning Act?
Minister to reply.
Thank you, Mr. President. It's £7,653, and that was spent on external consultants and surveyors where we did not have in-house expertise. Whilst we haven't had a registered building officer dedicated for some time, as you rightly point out, we do have qualified planning officers who have experience of registered buildings, and they have been fulfilling that role. But that distracts them from other duties and causes problems in other areas.